Cool, we're live. Welcome to another episode of WP Crowd. Today is an awesome one, talking about content, and again, second time we're talking about content in a month, I think.
Yeah.
But it's super important. So without further ado, let's do some introductions. I'm going to start on my left with Brian.
Hello, my name is Brian Rothstein. I am an internet marketer and web designer and the author of Content Marketing Ideas. So I know a little bit about content.
Sorry, Brian, how many stars is your book rated again?
It is rated 5 stars on Amazon.com, CA, and UK.
Awesome. All right, Carl.
Hi, I'm Carl Alexander. I'm mainly a writer. I write about advanced WordPress topics that give people headaches, among other things. And the rest of the time I do development work.
Awesome. Heather.
You skipped over to me unexpectedly. I am Heather Steele. I'm the owner of Blue Steel Solutions. We're a full-service marketing firm just outside of Dallas in Texas. We do a lot of WordPress work. We love the Genesis framework, but we also do full-service marketing. So we help small and medium-sized businesses with branding, strategy, lots of content marketing. Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Hopefully I have some good nuggets to share.
I might have to bring you on for our next Genesis. We did a Genesis podcast a little while ago, but we're planning on doing another one, so I'm going to have to remember that.
Definitely.
And finally, Jamie.
Hi, I'm Jamie Schmid. I am living in Portland, Oregon, and I am a WordPress developer. I do content strategy, content architecture, design. Mostly I'm just a content nut. So, yep.
Awesome. And as usual, I am Roy. I'm a WordPress developer at Disney, and I also own a company called, or co-founded a company called Art Control, which runs CodeCavalry.com. Couple things before we really get into it. First of all, happy Veterans Day. For those that are in the U.S., there's 2 Canadians in this group, so besides
Canada
you two,
too.
Is it Canada Veterans Day too?
Yes.
Yeah, they call it Remembrance Day here.
Okay, well then, happy Canada Remembrance and U.S. Veterans Day to
Just
everybody.
for the record, for listeners or watchers, both Carl and I are based in Montreal.
Yeah.
And another thing, so another crowd member that we usually have had on a few times, Rachel Carden. She's doing a AMA over on managewp.org. So go check it out and ask her a lot of questions because she's super knowledgeable in higher ed, WordPress, accessibility, stuff like that. And finally, just to burst anyone's bubble, we do have 2 contests running for free tickets to WordCamp US. We were going to give out the winners today. I was going to have my wonderful panel here help me out and pick the winners. But we are actually going to extend it another week, so we're actually going to pick the winners next week. So feel free to go over to the WPCrowd.com, check out our contests, and there's 2 of them. They're really easy, so just all you have to do is enter, and you can win a ticket. Actually, there's one more item I would like to point out. Tomorrow, Jordan, who's also from Canada, is starting a new podcast under the WP Crowd, and it's going to be all about accessibility. I think he's calling it the Ally podcast, so the A11Y podcast. So that's going to start tomorrow.
Is that how you pronounce that? I always thought it was A11E, A11E.
A11E, Ally. I guess you'll find out tomorrow. You should watch the podcast. All right, content. So we've talked about content before. Actually, Brian was on for that one, I think. And we were talking about kind of strategy, and we actually then did a whole podcast on custom post types, which also kind of relates because, once you have content, you have to create that content in WordPress. And now it's kind of like the final piece of the puzzle. How do you take that content that you've strategized and coded and market it? So without really getting into too much detail, and I know this is a really broad, hard question, I think one of the first things people have to understand when they want to market their content is to understand who their audience is. Brian pointed out to me before our show that our contest should be marketed to people in the Philadelphia and New York region, which that would make our audience or our target market for that piece of content that we want to put out there. So how do you guys decide, or how do you guys know what your audience is? And do you ever create new content for a new audience or a specific audience, or do you say, hey, this whole website needs to cater to one audience and that's it?
All right. Well, I'll start. I absolutely fall into the crowd of saying you need to create content for the audience you're going after, and the first step towards getting more people to pay attention to you is to actually create a persona and go after that persona. So a persona is basically a fictional character, a fictional representation of your ideal consumer or blog reader or anyone who you want to pay attention to you, and create content that will attract their attention, and that's really key. And one example that I always give that I think will help people understand what a persona is, like just really quickly, is think of Samuel Jackson. He's been typecast. He is the confident, tough guy in like the Star Wars movies, Avengers, like you name it, he's the same guy all the time. So you know that there are certain things he's going to do and certain things he's not going to do. He won't be in some like quiet, whispering, romantic love scene, because you're not expecting that from his character. So, but you are expecting him to be confident and tough and to be screaming at everybody like, "We're gonna get through this!" Da 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 da. Like that's Samuel Jackson's persona, his typecast persona. Think about what goes into the persona of your audience and create content that will reach out and connect with them.
And I would take it a step further and just say that when you're thinking about this ideal persona, we work with a lot of people who have ongoing clients, so it's a little easier from this perspective. But think about the person who you really loved working with. Like they pushed you a little bit, so you learned some during the project, but it was a great experience and it was profitable. And that's probably a really good snapshot of your ideal audience. And when we build those personas, we like to do it from the perspective of actual clients or actual customers so that we can really build that out and know what their interests are, their demographic, their age, what they worry about, and what keeps them up at night. So even beyond creating a fictional character, you can think of the real people who you've done business with and it's been a great experience. Why not make all of your content target those exact same people?
Yeah, and actually to add to what Heather's saying, I break down in my book, in my chapter on personas, I actually break it down into two main areas, demographic information and psychographic information. So demographic information is like age, gender, location, health status, educational status. We can all be put into one category or somewhere along like the continuum in those areas. And then in psychographic information, we're looking at people on an individual basis, like what are their needs, what are their wants, what is their digital device usage frequency, what is their buying behavior, buying habits, things like that. And then that really gets you the picture of who you want to get reach.
I'm wondering if we may have accidentally stolen our persona worksheet from your book. It sounds really similar.
One thing I actually, I've heard about personas for a long time, and once I actually started learning about UX a little bit more, that became a big thing with UX, and making sure the websites are built for persona. One thing I'd like to point out, which I didn't learn until, or maybe didn't hit me until actually I think WordCamp San Francisco last year, where someone was doing a really great presentation on personas, and they said, don't forget that personas can evolve and they can be organic in themselves. Like, I always thought, okay, you create a persona and that's it. Like, these are the people that are using my website, period, never going to change. I'm going to get, grandma at 55 or grandma at, whatever, and she's the one person visiting my website and using it. But really, yeah, once you get actual customers and actual clients and people actually using the website, your personas can completely evolve, and you might have a different grandma, or you might have, grandma might not even be part of your personas. You might have thought she was in the beginning before your actual data was coming in, but that can totally evolve and be organic. So that never really hit me as something that could be changed for a long time. It took me a little while to understand that, but I think it's important that people understand that personas aren't like set in stone or anything like that.
Yeah, that's a great point, especially for smaller businesses that change and kind of shift with the tide and do whatever's going to be most profitable each quarter. You're probably going to have a different audience from time to time.
Yeah. So let's talk about the content itself. A question I'm sure a lot of people get, especially as far as the consultants, freelancers, and I got a lot is, all right, I have a blog. How often do I need to write to said blog? What are you guys' takes on it? I've heard so many different answers to this question. So what are you guys doing, or what do you guys suggest your clients do as far as content quantity and like how often they're releasing new content?
I mean, I think it kind of depends on what your target audience is. Obviously, if you have a blog that is supporting your website and maybe it's just there as to give it a more human, aspect to it, then it's not something you need to be updating every single day. But if your website is revolving around your blog, like maybe you have, or like food website or something like that, then that's something that's your main content area. Then that definitely needs to be updated. But if you have a site where it's more of like, maybe it's like a brochure site about your company, and the blog is there to kind of show people that, hey, look, we're still around, we're still, doing stuff, then it's not necessarily something you need to update all the time.
Right, I agree with that. And the thing is, if you're talking about bloggers who are trying to build an audience and grow their audience, I think overall the key is consistency. So if you tell your audience, or the people who are coming to your website or potentially coming, that if you come to my blog every Monday, I've got a new article, then people will come every Monday, or be prepared to read it, or look forward to reading it every Monday. And it does depend on what your objective is. So I've run many blogs, but I guess my favorite is citynetmagazine.com, which is a Montreal-based magazine, for the most part Montreal-based, and we try to put up a new post every single day so that people know every day there's going to be a new story, probably talking about the topics we cover. I mean, it's a general interest lifestyle magazine, but if they come in every day, they'll be able to find something new. And so there's like a certain expectation. Now on our YouTube channel, like the CityNet Magazine YouTube channel, what we try to do is put up one new video every couple of days, so that people expect every couple of days they're going to get a message saying a new video has been posted. So it's really about keeping the consistency, the consistent rate going, so you build up a certain expectation.
Yeah. And don't forget. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, I think, at least for me, because a lot of the writing's for personal branding purposes, it's almost like building a habit. It's like training or going to the gym or things like that. Like, I try to write 150 words a day. It's a silly amount of words, but you know what? If you do it for 10 days, you have 1,500 words, and that's a pretty big article. And pumping out an article every 10 days is a pretty good rate for at least a personal blogger. I don't really care that much that somebody comes every day to the site. You should really have an email capture form. I'm surprised Brian didn't even mention that yet. You should have an email capture form. That's rule number one of content marketing, is you should have an email capture form. But besides that, yeah, just try to be consistent, because that's what's going to kill you at first, because you'll be really motivated to write your first blog post, but writing consistently is really what gets people coming back and back and back, and it's a really gradual process to build a brand around content. So you really have to be consistent and build a habit around it.
And I was just going to mention, go back to that audience and think about how often are they going to hear from you, because, for example, if you are that food blogger, they may want to see a new recipe every day or every week, but let's say you manufacture fasteners and you are the best fastener manufacturer there is. Well, no matter how much great content you have about that, the engineers that buy fasteners from you don't want to read a blog post about it every day. You're only 10% of what they do, so only bother them, the amount of time that really makes sense for them. So I think you have to back up and think about who's that audience and how often they're even going to want to consume your content based on those personas that you've already created.
Yeah, and the simple way that I break it down, especially just to clear up what Carl was just talking about, is I say, look, you're creating content and you're promoting content. It's kind of like a two-step process. You create, promote, create, promote. So the email marketing aspect, publishing links to your articles in your blog or your online magazines in Facebook, or tweeting them out, or promoting them, that's kind of phase 2. Phase 1 is create the content. And if the question is how frequently should you do it, I say do it consistently on a regular basis so that your audience knows when they can expect that content.
And I think also it's important for you to, even before you get to that point, kind of look at how much time and resources you actually have to create this content. If you're thinking about having a site where you're going to have, 3 new articles a day, you have to think about, do I have the people in place to be writing this content? Do I have my resources where I'm going to be getting this content from? Do I have time to even sit down and write, and time to, write out all my social media tweets and everything for that? Because, yeah, in the beginning you're going to be super into it, but then you're going to realize, oh, I actually don't have the hour a day that it takes to maintain all this content, or I don't have one person in every single department that's willing to write everything. So thinking about that beforehand, before you decide that you want to be writing 3 posts a day, actually think about if it's physically possible for your company to be outputting that content.
Yeah, I actually talk a lot of clients out of a blog because I know that they barely have time to write the content of their services for their website, and it takes weeks and months for them to get back to me with 300 words times 5 services, and I'm like, you want to put out a blog post on a regular basis? It's not going to happen. Just don't even bother.
Yep, and having a blog feed on your homepage or in a really prominent place where the latest blog post you've written was in 2013 actually looks worse than not having it there at all.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm all for creating content for good content purposes. I just can't help but think or make the connection of people who are like, I want a blog, and I don't care if anyone reads it. It's there for SEO purposes only, and it bugs me when people say that, and bugs me when people sell it, sell a website with a blog specifically only for SEO purposes. But you can't, they kind of go hand in hand, right? If you're creating a blog, you're going to get SEO credibility out of it because it's still content. So what do you guys say to people who, I say, they want to write content, but they're not really caring if anyone's actually going to read it? They're like, well, we just want a blog for SEO purposes. Is that a good thing? Is that not a good thing?
Well, that drives me completely crazy. It really, really does. And I've heard this a million times. In fact, so I give SEO workshops in Montreal, and I had a big company come. Basically, I was training one of my competitors. I'll leave it at that. Training one of my competitors, which I do very often. I've done that many times in the last decade or so, which is fine. And they were telling me how they have pre-made packages for clients, and they pay, let's say, $500 a month, and they get 2 blog posts. And I looked at the blog posts, and it didn't make any sense. The way that they were producing the content was just to have something up. It was garbage. And I told them, you can't offer packages that way. It just doesn't make any sense. And they're like, no, but that's how it is, and as long as the client's paying, we don't really care. We told them it's for SEO, and that's it. And of course, and I'm cringing the whole time. I'm lecturing them on, almost like the business ethics of doing that, which drives me crazy. It's no integrity. But at the end of the day, what you really need to do is write blog posts that anticipate needs. And I talk a lot about this. If you ever see me talk at a WordCamp, or see me on WordPress TV, I talk a lot about anticipating needs. And that's what your blog posts need to do. You need to figure out what does your persona, what does your target audience need to hear, what kind of information are they looking for, anticipate what they want, and give it to them, and generate, true value. And through that way, you'll be helping them content-wise, and through and directly and indirectly, like for SEO purposes.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, and I think it's such a red flag when a client brings in on board an SEO firm, because we don't do SEO direct, we have partners we work with, but every now and then we'll come across these firms that have that same mentality of just chug out some content, as long as it's got the keywords in it, who cares? And a good SEO firm will find that balance, and they'll work with your branding person or whoever is responsible for your online presence and make sure that, yeah, you're getting some of those keywords that are going to help get you traffic, but at the same time, let's make sure that this is reinforcing your brand and it's answering actual questions that your customers have, and it does a good job of communicating your values, but not just about the keywords. And there's plenty of times we write content for our clients, and a lot of them work with SEO firms, and we'll get a suggested keyword list, and we'll say, no, none of these work. None of these reinforce the brand. None of these say the message that we need to get across. So take these topics and go find us the keywords that match these topics.
We have a question from the chat room, actually, from Shelly. She asks, how do you guys schedule content? And is that a good thing? Should you be scheduling out content? I mean, granted, it's good that you can write content, like if you have the time to write content, let alone write it so much that you have too much of it to just post. So what do you guys use, or do you guys schedule out posts and stuff like that? And what do you guys use to do that?
Yeah, Editorial Calendar. That's what it is.
Is that a plugin or?
Yeah, so an editorial calendar is something that's been used in like the newspaper and magazine and industry forever. Obviously, they know that they have to have a certain amount of space taken up in the magazine or the newspaper, and they need people to fill those slots. But how do you keep track of who's going to be writing what? So it's kind of just like a scheduler. You can write it by hand on your desktop little notepad. There's WordPress. There's plugins. There's other self-hosted platforms. You can use Google Calendars. Basically, it's about looking down the line and writing out a schedule for your posts. And you can do it like, okay, on Monday my finished post is due, or you can do it like on Monday I start the draft and I get a first draft. Wednesday I maybe look at it and be like, okay, what can I add to this? Friday I do the finished post. Or you can also do like where Monday I write like a short little post that's about sort of a general topic, and then Wednesday is like my big post of like lots of content. And it also works if you have lots of different people. So say you have like not even just a blog website, but you have a regular website that you're gathering content for, and you're going to go live in say 2 months, and you have like 40 pages of content. Using an editorial calendar to divvy out content and be like, okay, on this day I need the first draft from Sue up in marketing, or so like that can also kind of help you keep on schedule and figure out who's assigned the content too.
Carl, I know that your blog posts tend to be lengthier, but also you tend to swing and hit home runs consistently with your blog posts. Every time you post something, the WordPress development community goes wild over everything you write.
I can't take credit for that. That was like you guys were talking about personas, and I purposely did not talk at all because my journey blogging is completely different from the typical standard way that you're supposed to do content marketing, which is you find your persona, the person that you're addressing. The problem that I had was that my persona that I wanted to talk to didn't formally exist in a very concrete way. It was kind of the advanced WordPress developer that was kind of aware of what's going on in the greater community, or wanted to do more and didn't really have the tools to do it, or somebody to teach them to do that. And I just kind of went with it, and really my only solution is just to keep writing. But at first it was very hard just to find. One thing that we haven't touched yet is where to publish content. Where do I publish these advanced posts before Advanced WordPress, the Facebook group, I didn't know where to post these things. I would just kind of post it and hope that they would somehow spread to the wonderful internet in hopes that people would notice. But it's been very kind of slow going, and in terms of the quality of the content, it's just practice. Like I said before, I write every day, and I hopefully am getting better at it. I have no idea, but sorry.
So how do you schedule yourself out? Like, how do you know? All right, I'm gonna put. Do you have a schedule that you're like, okay, I publish on these days?
When it's ready, I publish it. I don't have an editorial calendar per se. I have like an idea board. So I kind of write down any idea that I have for an article or something that I'd like to teach, and then I kind of pick one. I have an overall like a kind of direction that I want to go, but there's no calendar, again, because your personal blogging, right? It's a bit different. I'm not even selling products per se. The only thing that I have now is a free email course. So but it was always related to what I wrote about, which is object-oriented programming. So it wasn't really related to that as well. So I don't really need a calendar because of that, but I've done a few test posts where I've tried to sync it with a release of something. Like if you're doing an open source project, so if anybody listening here does a lot of open source projects, it's also a good way to promote your open source projects. You write a content marketing piece about it, and then you release it at the same time. So that's a way to schedule it.
So let's just transition right into what you were talking about and what we haven't brought up yet, which is in our last couple minutes here, which I'm sure we're going to run out of time, but how to get yourself out there a little bit more, or specifically your content. Where are you posting it? Do you just post it to your own blog, and then what do you do with it? Or do you bite the bullet and maybe post it somewhere else? Like I also blog on my personal site a lot, or I used to. I kind of been running out of time lately, but I always try to, and I want to get back into it. But I've thought, hey, let's try Medium, because that seems to be getting a lot more attention nowadays. So how do you guys tell your clients or yourself where to post, and then what to do with your post after it's published?
I can try to answer that a bit. I don't have Brian's expertise, but I like the idea of the watering hole. So we've talked a lot about personas. So your persona that you're targeting hang out somewhere, whether it's a subreddit or a Facebook group or God knows where. Like it could be a forum. They're hanging out there. So one, they're giving you topic ideas to talk about there, and two, it's places that you can publish your content, and you're really targeting the persona that you want to talk to. That's why I mentioned earlier the Advanced WordPress group was really useful, because before that I didn't really have a watering hole to communicate to. So I think that's really important to figure out.
Yeah, if you have a solid community in social media, on different social media platforms, whichever one is most relevant to you, you can get your work out there. So, for example, one of the things we do with CityNet Magazine is we'll publish a post, and then most of the time we'll immediately put a link in Facebook saying, okay, well, our latest post is up, check it out, and that gives other people an opportunity to share it on Facebook, for example. For some of our clients, we'll send out an email blast. It really depends on where your audience is and what they're expecting. But definitely, if you have really good content, you don't always want to publish it on your own blog. And I know people hate to hear that, because after you work 8-10 hours on this fantastic, carefully crafted blog post, you might want to actually guest post and put it somewhere, publish it somewhere else where people who really want to pay attention to that information will pay attention more so than your own blog, and you can actually drive traffic back into your blog that way. So, from a promotional perspective, it can be very helpful to do guest blogging.
And another thing that we kind of talked about at the beginning, but I was sort of saving for the end here, is your content isn't necessarily going to be, the same when you push it out to all these different places. So, for example, like on all your social media platforms, maybe when you publish a post, you want to post it, a little snippet of something to Facebook and then like another snippet to Twitter. It's perfectly reasonable to have a couple different fields for that when you write your blog post and say, okay, I know that Twitter has to be under a certain amount of characters, and my audience in Twitter is, they're just going to glance at it for a second. So I'll write this one little intro for this and make sure that this gets published with my Twitter post, or WordPress, or on Facebook. You know your Facebook community is certain people are following you on there, and you know you have a lot more space, so you can write an entirely separate snippet that goes out with that Facebook post. And you can even automate it. Like there's plugins in WordPress where you can, every time you publish a post, it automatically publishes out your little snippet to Twitter, your little snippet to Facebook.
So I would usually end here, but I actually got one more question, actually from Heather's Twitter account, asking us a question.
That's our content writer.
Oh, well, it's still a good question. And it's, should individual members of a business start their own blogs in addition to the company blog? So I find this pretty interesting just because, let's say, Brian, you have your company. Do you blog personally on top of your company blog, and then how do you justify, you know, from marketing and all that, doing one or the other, not just putting them all into your company blog?
Okay, so this is actually, we could do a whole half-an-hour show on this. Of course,
You
actually,
got like a minute.
Yeah, like most of the topics today. I have a minute, so I have this book. Okay. Here's the thing. It really depends on who you're targeting and where. So, for example, if you look at my Twitter account and look at the description, it says author of content marketing ideas. I do internet marketing, web design, WordPress, photography, whatever. However, if you go to like my Instagram account, for example, like my personal account, it doesn't say anything like that. It says I'm the editor-in-chief of CityNet magazine. So it really depends on, you know, who I actually want to see what. And it's the same thing happens with blog posts. Do you want to brand yourself as an expert in a particular field, or do you want to just be someone who submits to the corporate blog and be kind of like drowned out in like, you know, among a bunch of other writers? Or do you want to do both? So it's too complex to actually like tease apart like in like the next 30 seconds or whatever, but you have to consider what is it that you're trying to accomplish. And if you leave the company, do you get to keep the content? If you write something more controversial, do you take the blame for it? You know, are there levels of red tape involved, even if it's your personal blog, or does the company have to actually read and approve everything you do and say? There's a lot of factors you need to consider.
Anyone else want to chime in really quick on this one? From my point of view, I do blog personally. I do write for the Torque Mag, which is a WordPress publication online. I think it's sponsored by WP Engine. So I have the same problem. Is when I have an idea for a blog post, where do I put it? I haven't tried like just a Medium post yet, but I do have a couple places I can blog currently, including my own company. So yeah, I mean, it's totally something that it really does depend on the content, as Brian said, and I think it depends on who's going to see the content and how do you want them to perceive you. I think it's the ultimate question, and then depending on that answer and what the blog content is going to make you, I guess, perceived as, that's where you would post it. So I almost like having a couple different venues for content because it allows me to have a couple different personalities online. I can be WordPress developer Roy, or I can be computer geek video game nerd Roy, or I can be just, you know, Roy, depending on what social media and where I'm posting my content. So that's it, I think, for today. I think we're going to wrap it up a little late, but no problem. Thank you guys for joining us, and thank everyone else. Thank everyone for watching. See you guys next week.